In this video, we're going to be making homemade crochet bobbins from items you have right in your own home. All that's coming up next on Crocheting with Nyler. To make our large bobbins, I'm just going to use this fruit snacks box, and I like this box because it's pretty sturdy. Since I have this little piece, I'm going to start with it, and I'm just going to square it off and, try to straighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. And now I'm just going to use an old pair of scissors that I really don't use for fabric anymore, and I'm just going to use them to cut around the edges and make the edges from being square, make them round. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut in. I'm going to make a bow tie out of this. Now it's just simple, just cut the edges. Now this one's going to be a little odd shape because it was an odd piece of cardboard, but you see it kind of looks like an hourglass also. And when you're making your bobbins, the smaller you make it in the center, the more yarn you can put on it, but you don't want to make it too small because then it will bend and possibly break in half. So this one is a little bit wider at the center than I like it. So I'm just going to use my utility knife here, and I'm just going to cut down the center a little more. So as you see the finished product, it's a lot smaller than it was before, and that will allow me to wind a lot more yarn on this bobbin. Now that the bobbin is wound, I'm going to make a couple of little slits on each side, on the opposite ends of each side of the bobbin. And this helps to lock the yarn tail in so it doesn't unravel when it's not being used. For every project that you do, you're going to have your background color, and that's the color, that main color that you'll be using the most of. So that's the color that I like to use my large or my big mega bobbins. And I normally have multiple of these bobbins on standby since that's the main color, because you'll be running the yarn from one side of the project as well as the other side of the project. Now these end colors, or that main color, I also like to make sure I have about 3 or 4 extra bobbins. Now to cut my large or my mega bobbins, I'm going to cut off this end right here, because I don't really need it. And I'm going to also cut the other side off as well. Now, this box also has a reinforced piece on it, and I'm just going to take it off because I don't need that. And I can save this little piece here to make a small bobbin. So, for my large bobbins, or my mega bobbins, I'm going to cut them about 5 inches. So I'm just going to take this piece of cardboard here, and I'm just going to cut it in half. It's about 5.5, but it'll be okay. So I just rounded the corners and just cut off all my edges. Now I'm going to use my utility knife, and I made some cuts on the cardboard so you can see the cuts here. So now all I have to do is just pop them out, just like that. And now these are my large mega bobbins. Now you notice after popping it out, the excess cardboard, you see I still have some sharp edges and some rough edges. So you just want to round those edges off with your scissors because you don't want to snag your yarn. Those sharp edges will ruin your beautiful yarns. So I have some new bobbins cut. And of course these are my large ones, my large mega bobbins. See, by putting these in my hand, you can just see how much larger they are. And these are some of my smaller ones. I'm going to put them in my hand as well. And you can see they're not as big as my mega bobbins. And I wanted to show you a mistake that I made that you don't want to do. I cut the center of this bobbin just a little too thin. And I could still use it. But as you see what happens when you cut it too thin, it becomes flimsy and it'll probably break. So I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to toss it. I also wanted to show you how to make bobbins with your recycled toilet paper rolls. You're gonna take the roll and just kind of press it down as flat as you can get it. And if you have a bone folder or a knife, the back side of a knife, you could press it down, because these toilet paper rolls doubled over like this, they're pretty sturdy and they're pretty hard. But you want to fold and crease it down on both sides. Now you're going to pretty much make these the way you make the other ones. You're going to go ahead and cut this in half, and you're going to just cut it right down the middle. So now that you'll have 2 bobbins out of 1 toilet paper roll. And these are going to end up, like I said, being your smaller bobbins. So you're just going to kind of cut it out just like you would the other larger bobbins by using the utility knife and cutting. But when you're cutting, it can be a little challenging because you're cutting through both layers. And so you want to cut a little harder. And when you're cutting, make sure you cut all the way to the corner of each side of the roll. So now these are the ones that come from the toilet paper rolls. And because you've got 2 pieces of cardboard you're dealing with here, you could take a piece of double-sided tape and just put it on the inside so that the both of them can stick together and you don't have that hump. Of course, when you wind yarn on it, it's gonna kind of, mash it down also. But the double-sided tape just keeps it in place. And just like the other bobbins, you want to make sure you have your slit on the sides of each end. And when you're making your slit, you got to make sure it goes through both layers, since you're dealing with 2 pieces of cardboard. Now in the past, you've seen me put my slit right here at the end of the bobbin, but I found that by putting the slit on the side, the yarn stays in place a lot better than it does when it's on the end. So now if you don't want to cut out cardboard, you can use clothespins. They work pretty good, except you just can't wind as much yarn on them as you can with your cardboard bobbins, but they do work good. Now, when you're winding the clothespin bobbin, you want to make sure that you don't get the yarn so tight wrapped around and too far up that the clothespin won't open for you to lock in your thread. So I'm going to start winding, and I'm going to press lightly to open the pin just a little bit as I'm winding. That way, I know for sure I'm going to be able to close it and open it to lock in the thread. I'm going to start at the back, and I'm going to wind it until I fill it up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut the yarn. And I was able to get 210 rounds on this yarn, so that's not as much as I can on the larger ones. You see, it kind of looks like this smaller bobbin here. So you can wind it back and forth until, your yarn starts to slide off, which it will if it gets too big. So now to lock the thread in, you're just going to wrap the thread around until you almost run out, around the head portion of the clothespin. And then you're just going to open the clothespin and put the tail inside, and then you're going to close it. So I hope this tip has been helpful on how you crocheters can make your own bobbins with simple things you have at home: clothespin, cardboard, and toilet paper rolls. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you try it. Happy crocheting!